Hey everybody, what is up? I am really pleased to be back playing Dark Souls 3, and for my video today, I'm actually going to cover a topic that I was touching on my last video, which is my Spear of the Church build. You may recall that I was pretty well convinced that my build was about as efficient as it could be, and after a bunch of back and forth with Mocha and Silly Dog, I eventually came to see their point of view, and I think they're right. And I noticed on my build, I had 5 extra points in Faith for Soothing Sunlight, the damage cap, the soft cap's at 40, so those extra points are only valuable for casting. I've got an extra 2 points in Intelligence, presumably I added at some point to hit the minimum stats for a weapon. I don't even know what that was. You can see my defenses are really low, and also the attunement, I've got 3 slots when I only need 2, so I pick up 4 points there. 4 points plus the 2 in Intelligence plus the 5 in Faith, that's a total of 11 points, which on a soul level 90 is quite a few. So Silly was really great. He helped me construct a new build, and when I say helped, he pretty much did it. This is the build that he came up with. It's way improved, I have to say. I've got a ton more vitality, a lot more endurance, my vigor is higher. And I really, the only thing I'm giving up, Soothing Sunlight, I'm using Great Heal in place of Soothing Sunlight. It heals me enough, not quite as much, but close enough to be worth the trade-off. And really the only big thing that I'm giving up is I can't heal the Guardian quite as easily. But I was thinking about it and I realized I don't typically use Soothing Sunlight early enough in the fight to be that big a help to the Guardians anyway. So I don't think it's that big a sacrifice. Time will really tell. I'm going to show you a bunch of invasions I had with this guy. It should be a lot of fun, so stay tuned. So I have to say, I have had a ton of fun coming back to Dark Souls 3. It reminded me of what I gave up with Sekiro, the lack of PvP. The PvP in this game still really just as compelling as it's ever been. The meta game of fishing for backstabs has really helped me to keep this game fresh. It's been a ton of fun. And now I've gotten good enough at it where I can actually be successful enough that I land the stabs more often than I get punished for them. It's definitely, I would say, become like a core part of my strategy. And now if I'm in a really serious fight where I'm not like looking to fish, I can spot the opportunities when they come up and still be able to play just a generally good tactical game, which is really a kind of a great place to be. And there you see the Great Heal. Great Heal is nice too because it actually casts a little faster than Soothing Sunlight, so I'm able to use it a little bit more frequently, which is actually kind of a pleasant side effect that I really didn't anticipate when I gave up Soothing Sunlight. Now G9 actually made a point in favor of Soothing Sunlight, which is like when you're in like a 3v1 or a 4v1, your best opportunity to get rid of one of the Phantoms is when the Guardian's in play. So anything you can do to sort of extend the stay of the Guardian is in your favor. And while that's true, that would actually represent sort of a departure of my original strategy because I wasn't really focused on preserving the Guardian. It was more of a side effect. And here you can obviously see my backstab attempts that are getting me into trouble. This is pretty much the exception though, where I'm whiffing a bunch of these. That's not usually what happens. You'll see more in some of the upcoming clips. So both these guys have big weapons, or at least they had big weapons, and they were both doing pretty well. It's difficult because you're going to get roll caught when you roll one, you're going to get caught by the other. It does a good job of breaking your poise, but for whatever reason, the overleveled Phantom here decides to switch to straight sword and shield, and so I can pretty much predict the only reason he's going to do that is to go for parries, and sure as shit, he throws 2 of them out in quick succession, gets punished. They probably had the better of that fight and probably could have beaten me, but because they abandoned a strategy that was working for them, presumably actually because it was working so well, the other Phantom thought that he could kind of finish me off in style with a parry and end up meaning the end of the fight for him. And of course, once he's gone, the host is sure to follow quickly. Man, those orbs, even people that won't panic roll all the time, those orbs start flashing and putting them in hit stun, almost everybody will panic roll when that happens. So this fight was kind of interesting because it represented an evolution of my strategy. Roll catching is obviously a big part of this build. It's a big part of invading, but it is an especially big part of being a Spear of the Church because you're trying to keep your opponent from getting to their flask. Now I see this guy's got a parry tool out. I'm obviously being wary of parries and trying to mix up my timing. And here I run in specifically to check to see just how parry happy this guy is. And so far he doesn't seem to be too parry happy. I switched to the spear so I can space him out a bit more easily. But I am definitely waiting for the parry attempt. But what's really changed here is the level of aggression that I use in roll catching people with parry tools there. Like you can see, I'm being fairly aggressive about it. I usually don't like to go for too many in a row. Like I'll stop at 2, maybe 3 because people will eventually catch on, and then I'll mix up the timing a little bit. But I'm definitely a lot more aggressive about it because I don't think I was making the appropriate trade-offs. I was being too wary of the parry tools. So this clip right here, I left this in. It wasn't all that notable except for one thing that happens a lot. When I'm running somebody down and they're low on health, they want to heal. And this guy's kind of locked on right now so that when he stands up, he's locked on and I can't backstab him easily. But now I can tell he's going to want to heal, but he's probably not going to lock on to do it. So I'm just going to stay right on his ass and wait for the heal attempt and then backstab it. And there it is. And that happens all the time. I mean, that happens probably like 1 out of 3 spear invasions. And so I just thought I'd show that off because I thought that was kind of fun. So over time, I've actually come up with some things I call like iron rules of invading. They're like just things you can always count on. And there's one, I've never actually gotten around to making the video, and at this point I probably won't. But I will show off one of the rules here because this thing, it comes up all the time. And the rule basically is that if you're getting the better of a host or a phantom and they do something that's successful where maybe they're able to hit you with something, you can bet that they're going to go to it again, and you can bet that it's going to be sooner rather than later. So if a host gets a lucky parry off with a medium shield, you know they're going to start spamming it. And here I'm going to show off something that here this white phantom does that makes him end up being really predictable and lets me actually put him away. So I'm obviously trying to put pressure on him. He's being smart, trying to reaction roll, wait for his openings to get his heals off. I varied the timing there so he couldn't just always count on the roll catch timing. I'm hitting the L1 waggle. Unfortunately, I have to abandon the chase because the host is back there with his big-ass Fume Ultra Greatsword. I throw out the Spear Fragment to try to make some space. I get after this guy a bit. Now he's had a moment to think about it, and he uses Perseverance, which of course causes my S stock to bounce off. I know he's going to do it again, so now I'm switching over to the Greatsword. There it is again. I roll out. He overcommits to too many L1s with the Cestus, and I'm able to finish him off. But that was only because I knew exactly what he was going to do. Because he had some success against me, he made himself predictable, and I knew he would do exactly the same thing a second time. So along the same thread of predictable play, when I see inexperienced players using a weapon art like Perseverance, they tend to do so in a very predictable way, and they often expose themselves to being backstabbed because they will predictably hit Perseverance as soon as you run up. And there, for some reason, I got knocked out of the backstab animation, and I'm not quite sure why that happens and sort of under what conditions. I don't know if it's a property of having a really good connection. It seems to be the case, but I'm not yet sure. So if anyone out there knows, I would love to understand that a bit better. But again, there, just very predictable use of Perseverance means I can just run up and essentially get a free backstab. And the first time that I whiffed the backstab was not enough to dissuade the Phantom from trying it a second time. And look at that wombo combo from the Guardian. I think that was over 800 damage. They have like some 4 and 5 hit combos. Super nasty. So here I spawn and I see that we've got some casters, and so I'm going to immediately run over here behind the pillar. just to avoid the incoming spell spam. And it's interesting, I've never had anybody run over there and stop me from buffing up or from casting a Bountiful Light. I guess nobody's looking for it, but especially when there's 4 people getting blasted with CBV or Crystal Soul Spear, is probably not that big a deal. But when there's 1 or 2, you can easily have half your health wiped out before you've even really gotten started with the fight. It's the age-old challenge here, how to weave between everyone else and stay focused on another player and try and shut them out. And then the wisdom also comes when knowing when to abandon the effort. And here I can see that there's just too much heat. Having 4 players all trying to stop you, or 3 players trying to stop you from chasing the 4th, is just too much pressure. And that's where having the Guardian can really, really help and split the team's focus. But you see the Guardian standing there, and I'm not sure why, but sometimes I think maybe if they die before you come in, they just look like they're frozen there, but he's obviously gone. I like to sometimes stand right at like the edge of the virtual spears there, because it always is so tempting to everybody to come in and have a whack at you, but they end up taking a ton of damage, and it's usually around 225 to 250 every time they bump into it. So a couple swings and that's half their health. It's awesome. I think this is actually one of my very first fights coming back to the game, and so I was definitely feeling a little bit sloppy. My backstabs weren't going very well. My roll catch timing wasn't very good. This mage here actually has an interesting build. It looks like he's got like the candlestick dagger or sword, which is probably normally a good build because you can generate quick stun lock, but those types of quick stun lock builds are absolutely brutal against the spear because it takes a lot to stun me, and so I can just effectively poise through everything they throw at me. I give this host credit for fighting this out simply because so many hosts in the 3 and 4v1s, when you dispatch their phantoms, they just disconnect. I would say that happens probably at least half the time. So here when I spawn in, obviously I see the Ring Knight paired Greatsword. Mostly when I fight hosts who have this weapon, I don't have too difficult a time because in general they're not very good. Again, that's in general, not always true. But the problem is, obviously in this situation, I can't heal, and it's easy for him to resist my pressure with an Ultra Greatsword. So I'm really edgy. Now, fortunately, I saw that I interrupted his hyper armor there, and so I know we have a good connection, which I know now the wheelbarrow is going to come out. I'm able to space appropriately for it, and getting that backstab has actually been pretty reliable. Again, assuming the connection is okay. I find that to be the most effective way to deal with the Ring Knight paired Greatsword. As my game's evolved, I've learned the value of like jerky movements. I think the smoother your movements are, the more easily predictable you are, the more easily your opponent can predict what you're going to do. So unlocking, moving back and forth erratically, pumping L1 a lot, these things all help to confuse your opponent and make it hard for them to know what's coming next. And I saw the player with, I believe that's the Herald, or maybe that's the Exile actually. I saw him go one-handed, and the only reason you go one-handed with a curved greatsword, especially with a Cestus in your offhand, is to try to parry. So I saw that parry coming from a mile away, and obviously I was able to get around to his back and backstab him. The thing is, the Cestus has such quick recovery that you can't kind of just walk back there. You've got to almost land a pivot to have enough time to surprise them and have them with the parry and not have enough time to escape. And you can see the latency on this guy is so bad that he's actually locked onto a spot that's like 5 feet away from where my character was, which is really kind of bizarre. All right, so for the last couple clips, I figured I'd go back to sort of my normal style, which is featuring some of the larger ganks. I think each of these last 2 fights, they're 3v1s. And actually in each of these cases, these fights were preceded by other fights against these same groups, but for a variety of reasons, I just kind of found the other fights were a little bit more boring. I've been getting a ton of activity as a spear. It's actually been really awesome. In fact, the other day I was getting summons like every 45 seconds or so. This is on PC. I've tried a bit on PS4, but it's so dead. It's really not worth even trying. One notable change in my build is that I have a ton more poise. So I find it advantageous sometimes actually to switch to two-handing my greatsword. I prefer not to do that too much, though a useful pattern for me sometimes is I'll two-hand the greatsword, and then when I land an R1-R1 combo, that puts my opponent in enough of an Estus deficit that they're gonna run off and try to heal. And so at that point I can switch to one-handing, and then I can poke them and roll catch them and put them away. Watch what happens with the White Phantom there. I think right as he went to Estus, his lock-on shifted away from me and over to the Guardian. And I know as invaders, I'm sure we've all had that happen a million times. So it was sort of funny to see it happen to the host team. And you know, I imagine a lot of players aren't used to fighting more than one invader at once, aside from like actual gankers that do it a lot. If you're normally playing like with a 3v1, like that's your normal standard crew, and you don't use the dried fingers, you probably get a lot of invasions, but you never fight more than one invader at once. Alright, so this is the last clip. Again, I fought this crew once before, although they had a slight team change. So the Sunbro was not part of the previous gank. I think there was somebody else and they replaced him with the Sunbro, and I suspect it's because, you know, the Sunbro here, he's got a gold medal in the arena. So I see that, and right away that makes me wary of this guy. So he's gonna know how to fight. Obviously it doesn't mean he's gonna be awesome, but it means he's gonna have some idea of what he's doing, and in a 3 or 4v1, that's all it takes. That's really, really dangerous. If you had even just like 2 even above average players, they would almost certainly beat me. In the rare cases where I square off against a group of like 2 players that are good, I almost always lose those fights. And I keep kicking around the idea of showcasing some of those fights, and maybe I will one of these days. Maybe it won't be like the primary focus of the video, but it'd probably be interesting to watch. It's a little painful for me to rewatch them, but you can learn a lot. And essentially all it takes is concerted chase down, especially with something like spears. It's very difficult for me to do anything. And then of course if they use something to persevere through the spears when I'm trying to heal or using spells, that makes it almost impossible. Catch up break here. Unfortunately, I whiffed the Undead Hunter Charm. So you can see me L1 waggling like crazy, trying desperately to catch this guy here before everyone else piles on. You can see the gold medal dude here is being smart and is trying to take care of the Guardian. These situations are so crazy, and trying to figure out who to attack and where to prioritize your efforts, it's not always very easy. Unfortunately there, you saw that Sunbro was going for yet another backstab against my Guardian, but I was able to use the orbs to interrupt him, which bought the Guardian just enough time to get the heal off. And that was really quick thinking there. You see immediately he saw what I was doing and he went to his shield to keep me from pressuring him too much. He's doing a good job trying to reaction roll, trying to avoid the orbs. I saw him there kind of circling around to see if he could get a backstab. It's actually worked out really well. I was able to keep the Guardian around for quite a while, which was a huge factor in my success here. You see I start L1 waggling the moment they get up, so they start panic rolling, and it makes it really easy to roll catch them. And a nice bow from the Sunbro. You don't see that very often. GG guys. Thanks for stopping by. Take care everyone.